We're going to turn now to the Republican member of Congress who is walking back his explicit warning to Michael Cohen before his testimony. Florida Congressman Matt Gaetz is a staunch defender of President Trump, and though he is not a member of the House Oversight or Intelligence Committees, he took to Twitter yesterday evening. Hey, Michael Cohen, do your wife and father-in-law know about your girlfriends? Maybe tonight would be a good time for that chat. I wonder if she'll remain faithful when you're in prison. She's about to learn a lot. Speaking to reporters and on the House floor, Gaetz denied he was attempting to intimidate Cohen before testifying.
Can you explain to us what you meant in that tweet?
I think my tweet speaks for itself.
What does that mean? I mean,
We should go read it.
Do you have any insight onto Michael Cohen's relationships, or?
Well, I think you should tune in tomorrow to find out. This isn't witness tampering, it's witness testing.
I guess tomorrow we will find out if there is anyone that Michael Cohen hasn't lied to. We already know he lied to Congress. We already know he lied to law enforcement, lied to the IRS, lied to 3 banks, and he's going to prison for his lies. And so I guess it will be relevant for us to determine, like, does he lie to his own family? I think it is entirely appropriate for any member of this body to challenge the truthfulness and veracity and character for the people who have a history of lying and have a future that undoubtedly contains nothing but lies. That is the story of Michael Cohen. We'll see it play out tomorrow, and I, for one, can't wait to get to the bottom of things and can't wait to get to the truth.
But Gaetz then reconsidered his tweet and statements after Speaker Nancy Pelosi posted, "I encourage all members to be mindful that comments made on social media or in the press can adversely affect the ability of House committees to obtain the truthful and complete information necessary to fulfill their duties." Just before midnight, he deleted the tweet and wrote, "It was not my intent to threaten, as some believe I did. I should have chosen words that better showed my intent. I'm sorry." Let's bring in MSNBC chief legal correspondent and host of The Beat on MSNBC, Ari. I got a ton of questions for you. First of all, he tweeted this, and all the replies and comments on Twitter was like, that's witness intimidation, that's witness tampering, you're going to go to jail, like, this is against the law, you can't do this, you're a member. Like, it was just going wild, and I thought, my gosh, maybe someone else tweeted it for him. Like, that's just such a horrible thing to do, and it'll go down or something, and maybe, but then he says it, like, to the cameras, and then he says it on the House floor. So I guess my question to you is that witness intimidation? And is there a legal issue here?
There'd be a legal issue, certainly, if any other person was doing what he is doing, because it looks like witness tampering because it involves the very direct attempt to shape or intimidate the witness's testimony before a lawful proceeding, in this case a congressional one. There is a wider, basically wider terrain for sitting members of Congress under the speech and debate clause, but Speaker Pelosi not only obviously effectively shut him down, but she mentioned in her response, you read it, and she went on to also mention that the Ethics Committee can look into these matters, and the speech and debate clause doesn't protect against certain activities that go to undermine the House's working function itself. And so I imagine what happened here behind the scenes, in addition to her public statement, was someone helped Mr. Congressman Gaetz understand that he was really putting his own role in the House in a kind of jeopardy, at least with regard to ethics, if not, as you say, a broader legal inquiry.
Yeah, it's mind-boggling. It's so self-destructive. Okay, moving on to Michael Cohen. We've seen a lot of what he is preparing to say and in drafts that have been obtained by NBC News. We're seeing a potential that Michael Cohen will produce a signed check, one by President Trump, one by Don Jr., Weisselberg. What will Cohen say today or show today that could be of interest to either Bob Mueller or the Southern District of New York?
I think you hit it on the head, Mika. The opening statement and accompanying documents that his team is now making available, that NBC has obtained, show that this will not just be a he said between two characters that both can have some of their credibility impugned, a president who lies more than any in history, according to the Washington Post, and a person who's literally confessed to lying and is going to jail in part for it because of the documents that he's bringing. So as you say, some of these materials go right to the open probe in New York, who else was involved with and how many people helped mislead the authorities or hide what Michael Cohen says were campaign-related expenses. So all of that is documented, apparently, so that's going to be really fascinating. And then the other piece is he's talking about Russia, WikiLeaks stuff, and what Roger Stone told Donald Trump. And that gets into another person who's already been indicted but maintains his innocence and raises questions that I don't think may be fully answered today but are certainly going to be raised, which is, why did Michael Cohen know that Donald Trump knew that Roger Stone had advanced knowledge of WikiLeaks email dumps? And was that the end of it? Was that all of it? Or does that show there could be even more there?
So, Ari, how does this committee, the Oversight Committee today, weigh? We know about the documentary evidence on the Stormy Daniels case. That's how he proves the case there. But how do they weigh testimony from, again, a guy who's going to jail in part because he lied to Congress about the Trump Tower meeting, for example, where he's remembering conversations that he said he overheard between Don Jr. and Donald Trump in June of 2016, where Donald Trump effectively signs off on the meeting with the Russians to get dirt on Hillary Clinton. That's his word. His word has been proven false previously when he testified to Congress. How should this committee take Michael Cohen generally as a witness and specifically in that case?
I think it's a great question. I think it's the big question for anyone who's looking at this fair-minded, Willie. I think, number one, as we were discussing, what does he have to back it up, the documentation? When he says that the Trump Organization and the Trump Foundation ran as sort of quasi-criminal enterprises, that's an opinion. When he starts providing material records, then folks can adjudicate that, can weigh the evidence. Number two, while it's certainly true, you pointed out, we point out, his history here, including lying to Congress, that's literally part of why he's going to jail. It is important to keep in mind that all of his incentives now go towards being truthful today, which is different. And there's even a federal rule on this, Rule 35, that says that if you provide really truthful, helpful testimony, you may have your prison sentence reduced if it helps the government. And so, while it's true that he's lied before, everything we know about the situation is there's a great incentive for him to be truthful and helpful today, if for no other reason to help himself.
Okay.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.